Hi everybody, Michael here, and welcome back to the Art of Magical Living video series. I get lots of questions from people about how to start a magical practice. They're interested in magic, they just don't know where to start or how to start. So today we're going to take a look at that, and hopefully I can provide some guidance on how to get started on a magical path. So you want to practice magic, but you do not know how to start. Let's see if we can help you. So why practice magic? Well, first of all, there's never been a better time to practice magic. You won't get hanged or burned at the stake, at least so far. We have access to centuries worth of material. There's academic material from anthropology, archaeology, from historians, primary source material. So you're not just reading what people say about magical traditions. You can read the source material. You can read anthropological accounts of magical practices from around the world. All of this is available. And just recently, right before I began to record this video, I found out there is now an academic master's degree in magical studies at the University of Exeter. Now, this isn't how to practice magic, not by any means, but it just shows how academia is warming up to the study of magic. We're also living in a time of unprecedented crisis. We have the looming ecological crisis of climate change. We're watching societies fragment and draw into opposing camps. We're seeing the rise of reactionary ideology and fascism. What a magical practice can do is help build resilience and fortify you in this time of incredible change and crises. And we are magical creatures. Ever since our ancestors, the proto-humans, began scratching circles in the mud and painting on cave walls, we have been magical creatures. We have evolved to think and act magically. Now, some might dismiss magical thinking and deride it, but magical thinking and acting in ritualistic ways has evolved as part of us, so it must have some evolutionary function. What do we mean when we're talking about magic? There's a terrific quote from Ramsay Dukes, aka Lionel Snell, one of my favorite thinkers in this field. I love this. I think this really sums it up. He says, "Religion seeks to lift us from everyday matter towards spirit. Religions view us as just kind of dirt and mud formed out of clay, and we need to rise to the spiritual realities. We must be lifted up towards spirit, often with the intercession of priests or intermediaries. However, magic seeks to bring spirit down into everyday matter." And I love this part of this quote. Duke says, "While religion often reflects a quest for meaning, magic is more about sowing seeds of meaning. So instead of waiting to be lifted up spiritually, instead we pull the spirit down and we distribute the spirit throughout our world. We sow seeds of spiritual meaning in the world around us." So why do magic? Well, for one, it feels good. It's interesting, it's different, it's novel. Many people seek altered states through a variety of means. Meditation, probably the most common. Drugs, common. There's been a renewed interest in psychedelics and the psychedelic experience scientifically and culturally. What makes us chase these states? Well, they're not only enjoyable and insightful, but they can be very healing, as we're seeing shown quite clearly in modern research, but as indigenous people who have used these substances have known for millennia. A primary focus of magic and ritual is to generate altered states of consciousness. But when you take a psychedelic drug, you're committing yourself sometimes to 8, 10, 12 hours, recovery, integration. So it really requires a lot of time and energy. And although I value psychedelics immensely, they've contributed enormously to my life, my personal growth and development. One has to be careful, particularly as the psychedelic field is becoming very monetized, and venture capitalists are moving into the scene. So what magic and ritual do is they can provide those intense, visionary, altered states of consciousness, but in a much more controlled way, a way that doesn't require taking a day off of your life to experience something. Also, the magical rituals, you can just turn it off if you need to. So I think that is one reason people are drawn to magic in particular, to experience these deep, visionary, insightful, and healing altered states of consciousness. I love this quote from this book, Spellbound, by Daniel Z. Lieberman. Essentially, when we are in touch with the numinous, if we are in touch with the deeper aspects of ourselves, or the spiritual reality, or the field of consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, this numinous experience is personal. It knows who we are. It wants to communicate something to us directly that no one else would understand. It's intensely personal. It's also invigorating, he says. It makes you feel wide awake, more alert than under ordinary circumstances. And these experiences are full of vitality. They're simultaneously urgent and serene, and they stimulate yearning. Now, does that sound wonderful? It is wonderful, and that's what we cultivate when we practice magic. We can experience that numinosity. We can experience that deepening of our connection to whatever you want to call the universal source. Magic is a way of plugging directly into it. As referenced in the book Ritual by Dimitris Xygalatas, a book I highly recommend also, ritual, it turns out, can be as effective in reducing stress as some of our best anxiety medications. Think about that for a minute. Think about the anxiety in your life and all of our lives. More and more people becoming more and more anxious. That's why there's such a rise in anti-anxiety medications like Klonopin, Xanax, Valium. So if there is a simple ritual that we can do that can be as effective as some of these anti-anxiety medications, how incredible is that? Why aren't we all incorporating more rituals into our lives? And again, this is not just someone's opinion. This is not just anecdotal data. This comes from many, many studies, a growing body of studies about the importance and the effectiveness, the practical effectiveness of ritual. Ritual is also healing. This talks about another study. Participants were asked to think about a loss that they had experienced, whether they're mourning someone, broken relationship, or even a financial loss. They found that when they asked some of them to perform a ritual, they were better able to cope with the anxiety caused by the loss. Ritual can help us feel better. So a group of German psychologists did a study that found that people who used lucky charms or rituals like crossing their fingers did better in an assortment of skill games and puzzles. Basketball and golf players are more successful after performing pre-shot rituals. Think about that. You see the basketball players, you see baseball players, you see golfers. Oftentimes they'll take part in some brief little ritual before they take their shots, before they make a free throw. And why did they do that? It's not just silly superstition. It actually makes them perform better. And I love this story. John Hinkle Jr. was a bowling champion. He had been grieving the death of his father, so he had his father's ashes incorporated into a bowling ball. With that bowling ball, he was able to bowl a perfect game. And he said the experience was so overwhelming that by the last frame, he couldn't even see through the tears in his eyes, and yet he bowled a perfect game, which is not easy to do. What a remarkable story. So now we understand why we do magic. We see how it can have just basic practical benefits. Performing rituals in our lives can make us perform better, can make us feel better, can heal us. But the goal of magic is to bring about transformation of the self and the world through interaction with and manipulation of spiritual and archetypal energies, through contact with the spirit world, however you think of the spirit world, whether you believe in literal spirits, whether you believe you're integrating with some sort of underlying field, whether you just believe it's psychological. We plug in to this source field in order to transform ourselves and to transform our world. And magic utilizes a variety of techniques: meditation, visualization, the active or creative imagination, which is crucial, art, and rituals. Rituals, in turn, are made up of movements of the body, concentration, visualization, verbalization, and manipulation of physical objects to accomplish its goals. So that's why we do it. That's what it is. That's how we benefit from it. Now we'll look at different paths or traditions and look at the positives and negatives of those traditions to help you find a path of your own. So how to choose a magical path? This is the question that stymies a lot of people. So let's look at a number of traditions and see if they might be right for you. So first of all, when you talk about magic, people immediately think of witchcraft. Magic has become synonymous with witchcraft. And that can be good and it can be bad. So what are the pros of practicing witchcraft? Well, first of all, there's an enormous wealth and variety of materials. Witchcraft has exploded in popularity, and you'd have to be living under a rock to not see that. Now, that enormous wealth and variety of materials is a good thing. It's also a bad thing. You may have heard of Sturgeon's Law. It was coined by Theodore Sturgeon, science fiction writer. Sturgeon's Law is that 90% of any subject is crap. So if you've got thousands, tens of thousands of books about witchcraft, if you've got hundreds of thousands of videos on TikTok and Instagram, then most of them are going to be crap. So although it's great that there is so much out there about witchcraft, it just becomes harder to sort the wheat from the chaff. Another positive aspect of witchcraft is it's got decades of tradition. So most of what is called witchcraft or Wicca is really a fairly modern invention. Most of it only goes back to like the 1940s, 1950s. But that's still a lot of tradition. And you can find covens all across the world that have these lineages that were established some time ago. Now, not ancient times. That's where we have a drawback to the practice of witchcraft, is that there's so much erroneous and dubious history. Any tradition that says it traces its lineage back to classical era or ancient times is nonsense. The witchcraft that is practiced by people today, it's a modern invention. It incorporates a lot of ideas and philosophies from ancient magical practices, but there is no real direct lineage. So don't trust anyone who tells you that. That's a good way to sort that wheat from the chaff. Find books that approach witchcraft historically. If you're reading a book about witchcraft or watching a video or something, and it says that it has its roots in the ancient past, put it down. Pick up something else instead. Most witches acknowledge the fact that they are participating in a new religious movement, relatively new. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. They acknowledge that it is a new spiritual, new religious movement with roots in the past, with roots in mythology and roots in history, but not a direct lineage. I should also point out that most people who were hanged or burned at the stake for witchcraft were not practicing witches. They were not pagans. They were not practicing the old religion. They were just scapegoated people. They were people who were disliked for some reason, and they were maligned as witches by Christians who persecuted them and often killed them. The historical accounts of witchcraft are fascinating, and I encourage you to read as much history as possible if you decide to practice witchcraft. And another issue for me is that witchcraft has become an aesthetic. It's the dark makeup, it's the goth appearance, it's this spooky affectation. And that's okay. Many of my witch friends, you can look at them and you can see that they are witches. And a lot of people who are getting into witchcraft feel like they have to adopt the look and style of a witch. You most certainly can, but you don't need to. You can be a button-down Oxford and khakis witch. So if you want to practice witchcraft, realize that you don't need to affect that witchy look, that witchy persona. So let's look at ceremonial or grimoire magic. Grimoires being magical books, the study of magic via text that were used historically. Now, this type of magic is incredibly immersive. It can generate deep, powerful internal mental states and altered states of consciousness. It does that through the use of a lot of stuff, props, costumes. Also, on the pro side of ceremonial and grimoire magic there is a lot of historical documentation, and there is precedent for this magic, and where more and more of it is being published all the time. Here we have some accoutrements of Golden Dawn-based ceremonial magic. I practiced this for many years. The one thing about this style of magic is that it can cost you money. You may also find yourself spending a lot of money at craft stores as you make the props, as you make your magical tools. This was fun for me. I loved making my pentacle. I loved painting sigils on my ceremonial knife. I loved just all of the stuff. It was fun. It was engaging. I could just sit for hours and paint and design some of these materials. And then when you're done, there's a real sense of accomplishment that you get from it. However, it can be expensive. Some ceremonial magicians believe they have to have things like silver talismans or things made of precious metals. That stuff's expensive. Another drawback is that it has a very, very Christian vibe to it. Most grimoire magic was developed in Christian cultures in Europe. So even though you might be doing things that Christians frown upon by summoning and working with demons, it's still all through a very Christian lens. So I know a lot of people who want nothing to do with Christianity. They've had really terrible experiences with Christian churches, abuse, things like that, and they just want to stay away from it and not have anything to do with it. If that's the case, you may want to avoid ceremonial magic. Another drawback is because these systems are so complex and deep, you can spin your wheels, which is what happened to me. As I got deeper and deeper into the Golden Dawn system of magic, I realized I was spending more time trying to cram all these associations into my head and make sense of everything instead of actually just doing magic. I prefer much more simple and direct magical techniques. These systems can also be limited and rigid. There's not a whole lot of room for innovation. That's not to say you can't innovate within these traditions, but they tend to be pretty stodgy. There's also a lot of erroneous history in these systems. A lot of them originated in the 19th century. So there's a lot of history and anthropology that we didn't know about. For example, in the Golden Dawn system of magic, there's a lot of emphasis on Egyptian mythology and Egyptian religion, and they just didn't know as much as we do now. So there's a lot of things that just simply don't make sense from our modern perspective. There's also a lot of cultural appropriation, which is one of the reasons I stopped doing Western Kabbalistic-based magic after I spoke to a rabbi who said to me, "That's not Kabbalah that you're doing in the Golden Dawn." I said, "Well, yes, of course it is." And he said, "No, that's not. That's Christianized Kabbalah." He said a Jewish rabbi would look at that and tell you that it's nonsense. It's a Christian perspective on a Jewish tradition. He said if you want to work with the Kabbalah, find a rabbi, find a Jewish teacher who could teach you the real stuff. And that really was a pivotal learning point for me when I decided that I was kind of done with this system. Now, even though I've mentioned a bunch of negatives, like I said, ceremonial magic can be really rewarding. It's definitely great if you're a very logical person, if you like playing with different concepts, if you like complexity. This might be right up your alley. If you want to pursue this magic, I do have some resources that I would recommend. And although a lot of longtime occultists poo-poo this book and would probably ridicule me for recommending it to you, it's a fantastic book to get a taste of Golden Dawn ceremonial magic. Just a good overview of magic in general. And that's Modern Magic by Donald Kraig, the late Donald Kraig. It's a great book. It takes you very slowly and introduces you to the concepts of Golden Dawn magic in a way that's very approachable. It's well structured. It's actually just a good course. Now, if you're more inclined to Aleister Crowley's Thelema, then I would recommend a book by my friend Marco Visconti called The Aleister Crowley Manual. There's no better entryway into Thelemic magic than Marco's book. It's a great way to get your feet wet and see if that's the type of magic that you like. If you're interested in working with a grimoire, the easiest entryway into grimoire magic is called the Arbitel. Now, just because on the face of it, it seems pretty easy, it's also very Christian, has a very positive vibe. But I will guarantee you, this is a powerful book of magic if you follow it. It deals with planetary intelligences. And if you want to get a taste of what encountering spiritual entities and working with spiritual entities is like, I guarantee you this book will blow your mind if you follow the techniques within it. I should say at this point, I'll put a link to a lot of this material that I'm recommending in the description below so you can find it. There's another great book on the Arbitel that I highly recommend, and I'll drop that down there as well. Then there is chaos magic. Chaos magic is experimental, flexible, and very modern. I prefer the term experimental magic over chaos magic because chaos just has connotations that don't really fit what the magic does. Chaos magic is also very syncretic. The idea of chaos magic is you look at other magical systems, you see what works, and you take it and use it if it works. So it's very syncretic. So it's more of a cafeteria style magic where you take one from here and one from there and one from there. Chaos magic also avoids a lot of historical inaccuracies in other traditions because it is so new and it doesn't take these ancient books and these ancient techniques as gospel writ, so to speak. It is all about experimenting with various techniques. One of the major developments to come out of chaos magic is the modern practice of magical sigils. I have worked with them extensively. As a matter of fact, it's the first real magic I ever did when I got results, and it kind of blew my mind. It taught me this stuff is real and can have real world effects. On the downside of chaos magic is that looseness. Some people don't like that looseness, that fully wide open aspect of it. And some of it can be silly. Chaos magicians have talked about summoning Santa Claus and Superman and Mickey Mouse and things like that. It's just really not my cup of tea. Now we get into indigenous practices, ATRs, African traditional religious practices, shamanism, the African diaspora traditions like Vodun or Voodoo, Palo Mayombe, Santeria. Before you decide you want to pursue any of these practices, any sort of indigenous practice or diasporic African practice, I just want to say, don't read a book and think you can do this stuff. Most of these traditions require initiation. You need to be brought into them. Part of that is to protect you. You do not want to be practicing some of these traditions without the built-in safeguards. You could put yourself in danger. But there's also that icky aspect of cultural appropriation. There are closed practices. Many of these practices are closed to outsiders. You need to ask to be brought in, and you need to be accepted. So you can't just read a book about Santeria and start practicing. Don't do that for your own good, as well as just to not be a jerk. Many of these traditions also require a major time commitment, and it may not be easy to find practitioners or a group where you live, and you really need to do a lot of this stuff in person. As far as appropriation, we all know it's not good to walk around wearing Native American headdresses and things like that. It's also not good to be burning sage, okay? That's kind of a yucky appropriative thing. There are plenty of incenses and fragrances and things that you can work with that that do not require appropriating from Native American traditions. So just be respectful of other traditions. If someone in another tradition says, don't do that, that's ours, don't do it. And when it comes to shamanism, a lot of shamanic practices have been incorporated into a lot of the psychedelic culture. Some of that honestly feels a little icky to me as well. I also don't think someone can take a workshop and call themselves a shaman. Shamans are generally people who come out of a culture that values shamanism. There's certainly universal or semi-universal shamanic techniques that you can work with. And when I teach magic, I make sure people avoid that theft of material that is not theirs. There's plenty to go around. There's plenty that's not closed. There's plenty that's not culture bound. And now we get to folk magic. I love folk magic. Folk magic is simple. It's direct. It's very malleable. You can change things pretty easily and readily without feeling like you're mucking things up. Most folk magic, because it's of the people, requires very little as far as exotic stuff. Most of the elements used in folk magic you can find really cheap. Candles, paper, string. It's because a lot of folk magic originated with people who didn't have much in the way of resources. And the magic of the enslaved people of the United States, where I live, hoodoo, root work, and conjure. This magic was magic of repressed, marginalized, enslaved people who had very little materials to work with. So a lot of it is very simplistic. It uses nails, it uses burlap, it uses easy to find plants and roots. And most of these folk traditions are relatively open. They're not closed systems. Even though hoodoo originated among enslaved Africans, it expanded and adopted other traditions again in that syncretism. Now here's another aspect of magic that doesn't get a lot of attention, but I think it should get way more attention, and that's DIY, do-it-yourself magic, or MYOM, make your own magic. Now, this has been the focus of much of my work over many, many years, especially since I stopped ceremonial magic. I had a bit of a eureka when I was spinning my wheels, when I began to worry about appropriation, and I thought, maybe if I just scratch all of this that I've been doing, go back to the beginning, start with the earliest historical records of magic and study them and work my way up and work my way globally across cultures and read as much as I can, practice as much as I can, and try to find the universalities. What underlies all of these techniques or most of these techniques? And how can I work with those universal elements, which I call templates of magic? And I was encouraged by syncretism, again, by avoiding outright appropriation and theft, but also using what works from other traditions, taking what works in other traditions and reworking them a little bit or putting a new skin on them. When you do DIY or MYOM magic, you can use a diverse set of symbols. You're not constrained to the Tree of Life, the Kabbalah, and the Hebrew alphabet, as with much Western ceremonial magic. You can use all different sorts of symbolic systems. You can use the tarot, and you can use geomancy, and you can use the I Ching. You can work with all sorts of symbolic systems and combine them and mix and match them and see what works for you. I also include under this DIY magic certain visionary magical systems, one in particular pioneered by Josephine McCarthy and the Quaria system, which you can find completely free online. And as part of finding that template of magic that I talked about that underlies so many traditions, I think a good focus for DIY magic is sympathetic magic and contagion. These two concepts go back to Fraser's The Golden Bough, if not earlier than that. And the idea is very simple. That's why some people, when they're doing planetary magic, say they're working with the energy of the planet Mars. They will utilize plants that are red. They will use minerals and gems that are red in color. They will use spicy fragrances like cinnamon, for example, because in magic, things that look alike, things that have resemblances are connected. There's a sympathy between them. And as far as contagion goes, that's why in many traditions people are afraid of their fingernail pairings or their hair getting in the hands of someone malevolent, because if you have a piece of something, you have a connection to the whole. That's also the reason people pay exorbitant amounts of money for things that belonged to musicians, let's say, or celebrities, like an autograph of John Lennon that can go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Really, we know that it's just a scrawl of ink on a piece of paper, but there's some sort of magic attached to it. In the same way that if I told you I had a sweater that I got from someone who was a serial killer, even though I washed it, cleaned it, dry cleaned it, you probably still wouldn't want to wear that sweater. It would have an icky feeling to it. That's contagion. So you can work with these two principles and really develop a lot of techniques just from understanding them. What's the first step in beginning a magical practice? Well, I recommend, and many magical teachers and magical traditions recommend, first of all, you take up some sort of divination practice. And if you know me, if you've watched my other videos, if you have seen my courses, you probably understand that tarot is my favorite. And I love this quote, again from Ramsey Dukes, a.k.a. Lionel Snell. He says that most magical systems can best be understood as alternative languages. The tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, the I Ching, and runes, they all provide a set of symbols that can be used to describe, model, or articulate almost any phenomenon. So divinatory systems can be understood sort of as alphabets that you can rearrange into sentences that can describe the world around you and the world inside of you. You would have to be a cloistered hermit, no pun intended, I guess, to not realize the explosion of tarot in popularity in recent years. Everybody is doing it. And there's a good reason for it, too. Tarot is a powerful pictorial, symbolic system. These cards are pictures. They're full of archetypal elements and symbolism. They resonate with us. They are powerful pieces of art. And we can put them together like sentences. We could put them together like panels in a comic book to tell stories. So they are a storytelling, a visual storytelling system that is almost unequaled. It's easy to grasp because we are very visual creatures. We look at these cards and we could start to understand what they mean, even if we haven't studied them at all. But just as with witchcraft, this incredible popularity, this immensity of resources related to tarot can also be a problem. There's Sturgeon's Law again. 90% of it is crap, which is why I teach in my Tarot Foundations course the stuff that is not crap. I teach the history because you have to know the history of tarot because there's so much pseudo-history that gets repeated ad nauseum out there. So I will say, if you're interested in tarot, please take a look at my Tarot Foundations course. On TikTok, 48.7 billion views of TikTok videos tagged with tarot. That's billion. And if 90% of that is crap, that's a lot of crap. Perhaps only second to tarot is the ancient Chinese oracular system called the I Ching. It is one of the oldest divination systems, if not the oldest. It is rather easy to do. It's a binary system. All you need is an I Ching book and 3 pennies. And within a couple of minutes, you could be throwing your first hexagram. The I Ching rewards lifelong practice. Carl Jung famously said if he could live his life over again, then he would dedicate it to working with the I Ching. As Jung noted, and many others have too, when you work with the I Ching, it starts to feel like you're working with a presence. It starts to feel like you're working with an entity, a wise, helpful entity that brings insight into your life. It has a personality of sorts. Now, the one drawback to the I Ching is that there are many, many interpretations of the book. Some versions of the I Ching can be very, very opaque, and it just doesn't click with some people. So I would say if you're interested in this oracle, just get a book out of the library or read some of the translations online and give it a try and see what you think. But if you do, I can guarantee you I've been doing the I Ching since the late 80s, and it is a constant companion. I look to it all the time, not as much as I use tarot, but extensively, especially at points in my life where I feel like I really need some insight and guidance. Geomancy, I believe, is due for a renaissance. It's also very ancient. It's an Arabic system. It originated, allegedly, in people observing the marks left by birds in the sands. It's an ancient system, an Arabic system. It should not be confused with what is sometimes called geomancy, which is more like feng shui, Chinese. This is a completely different system. Traditional geomancy is a simple binary system. You can use a variety of different randomization techniques to generate a pattern of these symbols, which are known as geomancy figures. You can see here. Again, it's binary like the I Ching. It seems sort of modern because so much of our technology is based in binary systems. Very simple to generate these figures. You generate them in a diagram called a shield, and then based upon the way these figures interact with each other, they generate a final figure. That's your answer. The other great thing about geomancy is that it's astrologically based. So if you're already into astrology, if you already understand astrology, you might really like this system because it incorporates classical astrology, the classical houses of astrology. It has very straightforward answers. I've never used a divination system that just can lay it all out like geomancy does. Geomancy is extremely direct in its answers. People used to use it for things like finding lost items, or for simple like yes and no answers. Should I do this? If I do this, will this happen? Geomancy is extremely direct. The one drawback to this system is that it can get really complex. You could do very simple readings, but then there are these additional layers of the reading that can get really complicated. But if you're looking to use a divination system that not a lot of other people are doing, if you're already a professional reader and you want to add something extra to your toolkit, Geomancy is a phenomenal oracle. Now, there are other systems out there that I did not touch upon, and that's because I do not have a lot of experience with them. A friend of mine, Kiki Dombrowski, has published this book called A Curious Future, and it's a great overall look at divination systems. So it's not in-depth in a lot of them, but if you just want to understand what types of divination systems are out there to see if something appeals to you, I would certainly recommend picking up this book. It's just a great broad overview of various systems. So now just some general thoughts about magic. Now you've seen the various traditions, the various sorts of practices that you might want to look into, that you might want to take up for yourself. But what about just in general approaching magic? Well, first of all, I like to look at magic, especially thaumaturgic magic, when you're doing magic to change things in the world, is a way to nudge probability. Now, a lot of people who disparage magic think it's all wish fulfillment, but most actual practitioners of magic do not think that way. We realize that just because you may want a Maserati, that doing a ritual for a Maserati is extremely unlikely to end up with a Maserati pulling into your driveway and someone handing you the keys. That's not how magic works. Magic doesn't violate reality in that sense. But what magic can do is nudge probability. Magic can push something in your favor. Rituals can work to push probability in the direction that you want it to go in. But you have to do the work. Forget the Maserati. Let's say you just want to find a better job. You're not just going to do a ritual and wake up to find someone has offered you a job. You need to look for employment. You need to send out resumes. Now, what you can do if you've done that work is to do a ritual to push that resume into the right hands. So you need to do the work. You need to send out the resumes. You need to do the interviews to get the job. But you can do rituals to give yourself confidence in those interviews. You can do a ritual to push probability in your favor. The same if you are looking for a romantic relationship. You're not just going to do a ritual and wake up the next day with someone pounding on your door wanting to date you. You still need to make yourself available. You need to circulate. You need to at least be on dating apps. But what ritual can also do is make you feel better about yourself, make you feel more confident, make you feel more comfortable with yourself. So when you do meet someone, so when you do go on a date with someone, they find you captivating, they find you appealing. So as with a lot of magic, working on yourself is really the key to getting results. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes. I also believe it's really helpful to take up a physical practice, but even more importantly, a physical practice that works with energy. There's no better system I know of than Qigong. Qigong is a physical system that will exercise your body in a very gentle way, but it will also make you aware of the energy within you and how to circulate that energy, which is a very important tool for any practicing magician. And also, when you do take up a practice, commit to it. Figure out a way to do it regularly, daily if possible. Even if it's simply devotional, like tending to an altar, where you might have a statue of a god or goddess or an ancestor altar, or even just a meditation or a visualization practice that you do. If there's something that you can engage in regularly, it will keep you involved. It will keep you absorbed. It will keep you growing and progressing. And you won't just be an armchair magician or a dilettante. You will be an actual practitioner. Another recommendation I have, especially when you're first getting started, is to stay model agnostic. There are several ways that people will tell you that magic works. Some say it's all about spirits and interacting with spirits. Some people will say magic works as natural magic through the use of plants, herbs, stones, etc. I tend to lean into the information universe model, and that is the idea that the universe is made up of information and symbols, and that by working with information and symbols, we can mold reality. Reality is a bit more plastic, and we can change it and shape it in the way that we want. Some people believe that magic is all about personal power, personal energy that we shape within ourselves and we send out to do things for us or to influence the world around us. Some people have an animist perspective to magic, and that is everything is alive. That rock is alive. That tree is alive. That cloud is alive. We can communicate with all of these things. The whole world around us is alive. So if we interact with reality as living beings, it will respond as living beings would. Many indigenous systems are animist-based. But ultimately, I want you to keep all of those in your mind and not latch on to one of them. Because ultimately, we're concerned with what works, not how it works. And not whether it's true in some sense, but whether it's useful. In magic, many different things can be true, including paradoxical things that contradict each other. They could be true at different times and in different ways. Magic encourages a sense of flexibility, and the more flexible you can be in your thinking about magic, I think the more you will get out of it. Now, when I first started studying indigenous divination methods, particularly how psychedelics were used in indigenous cultures, I realized that divination throughout history has been used for finding someone that was lost, communicating with someone across vast distances, healing people, to know what's ahead of us, to know where we're going, to predict the weather. Now, what has happened in recent years because of technology has usurped magic in so many ways. Technology has replaced a lot of what magic and divination was used for in the past. So nowadays, if we want to get in touch with someone on the other side of the planet, we pull out our phones and fire up FaceTime. Modern medicine can heal incredible maladies and diseases that people in the past had no idea what was going on inside the body. Now we can see inside the body. We can rearrange elements of the body with sound and light. And we know where we're going and what lies ahead because we've got GPS. And we can look on webcams from all over the world from somewhere we might be going and know exactly what's going on there. If we want to find a lost object, oftentimes we pull out our phones again and look for the AirTag and know exactly where that object went to. So now that technology has replaced magic for all of these primary purposes that it was used for, what is magic good for? Well, I would say we go back to what was carved above the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece, and that is the admonition to know thyself. Because now that we don't need to use magic, we don't need to look into a scrying stone to see what someone's doing far away. When we don't need to use magic to heal people, we can just go to the doctor and take a pill. Now that technology has supplanted so much of what magic has done, I think the real magic that's left is what the Greeks called Theurgy, and that is aligning ourselves with spirit, with growing ourselves as spiritual beings, with developing a deeper understanding of who we are so that we can maneuver better in the world, so we can be better people. So in many ways, magic is one of the best techniques for self-transformation and spiritual growth. getting to know who you are, getting rid of all the crud that has accumulated from experiences, from anxieties, from bad patterns, clearing ourselves of all of that junk and finding out what is at the core of our being is really the target of most meditative practices, yoga, many spiritual systems. It's not about making changes in the world. It's not looking into a scrying stone when you're away from your castle to find out that someone is stealing or cheating on you with your spouse. Magic is about understanding who we are so that we can live better, so that we can deal better with the adversities that come our way, so that we can make the things that we want to happen more likely, that we can put ourselves in the places that we want to be at the right time for magical and wonderful things to happen. All of that is about the self. All of that is about self-knowledge and awareness and understanding. That is the real power of magic. And that's what I encourage you to think about. A lot of people get into magic for ego-based reasons. They want to make more money. They just want things. They want experiences. And that's all great and that's fine. And magic can help you get there. But the real goal of magic, and I think the goal you should think about and you should always work toward in any magical practice, is aligning yourself with deeper spiritual values to develop your spiritual power, to develop yourself into someone who gets along better with people, someone who great things happen to, someone who can make great things happen and can create magic. You become the magician. Like the magician in the tarot, you have all the tools available to you, but it takes work, it takes effort, it takes energy and introspection and understanding. And then you make magic happen. You make your life magical. So how's that for a pep talk? I will just say personally that since I began practicing magic, it has opened extraordinary vistas in my life. It has made so many wonderful things happen. Now, every life is full of adversity. Every life is full of suffering, as the Buddha says. Life is hard. It's always going to be hard. You're always going to lose things. Things are always going to happen to you that you don't want to happen. But if you take up a practice of magic, even the hard parts will be easier to bear. And those hard parts will be fewer and fewer and fewer as you work toward creating a better life for yourself, as you better your relationships with other people and other sentient beings. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I encourage you to take the step, take up a practice. I have lots and lots of recommendations because I've been through this. I've practiced many, many traditions. I've experimented with many, many techniques. And what I've worked on for years now is to refine these practices and make them understandable, to make them easy for other people to adapt and use. My newest course is Tarot Magic. This, I truly believe, this is a revolutionary new magical system. And it's based entirely in the archetypes, symbolism, and energies of the historical tarot. I don't even like to say I created this system because I believe the tarot created this system. I was just there to receive it. As I said, the system is a self-contained magical system. It's experimental and personalized, so you can work with it to achieve your goals, not my goals. This system is meant to help you do magic for yourself. It utilizes techniques from a broad range of magical traditions. So there's folk magic, Eastern and Western esoteric practices, witchcraft, chaos magic, and hoodoo, conjure, new thought. So really, again, this is a DIY system. This is a make-your-own magic system that I've worked on and polished and refined for a long time. I'm super excited to share it with other people. It's ecumenical. You don't have to adopt any sort of spiritual outlook. I'm not preaching any sort of spirituality to you. Take what you want, plug it into your own system if you already practice something. The course launches November 13th, 2023. The full price at launch will be $129. That includes 13 modules with multiple videos in each module. The course is self-paced. You could take it at your own speed. You can do it anytime that's convenient for you. So there's no pressure. There's no live meetings that you have to be there for. You could take it at your leisure. And to make that even easier and appealing, I now offer a service called Afterpay. So you can buy now and you can break that down into 4 installments. There's a built-in private supportive community app just for students of this class. So you can interact with each other. You can even video chat live with students in the courses. So you can exchange information, talk about what you're learning, get help with something you're stuck on. So please, if you're interested, please go to the website, theartofmagicalliving.com. You'll get a full description of the course. There's another video there that explains the outline, the structure of the course, and what you can expect. You can find full details at theartofmagicalliving.com. So again, I want to thank you for your time. I hope that this tour through various magical practices may have given you a taste of what you can look forward to. Magic has brought so much meaning. Magic has brought so much enjoyment and happiness to my life that I really want to share that with as many people as possible. So I hope this has inspired you. If you have any questions, please leave them below. You can always reach out to me through my website as well, theartofmagicalliving.com, where you can find my tarot Foundations course if you just want to learn about tarot and read tarot, and as I just mentioned, the Tarot Magic course, which I'm super excited to be sharing, and I think a lot of you will really enjoy. So thanks again, and I will see you next time.